Once again, Australian football is at a crossroads. Speculation over the future of the national second tier is rampant. Football Australia's own deadline is now passed by a month and a half, and inside reports suggest that the promised home and away schedule is likely to be replaced by a Champions League format, to the disapproval of many fans, and now, at least publicly, by one of the 8 inaugural clubs, South Melbourne. There's plenty to dive into on the NST front. Last year's Johnny Warren medalist is set to get his move to Europe. Wellington go international for a new goalkeeper. The draw for the Asian Champions League Elite is pointless, and HBF Park is set for an upgrade on this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast, supported by Deploy Football. My name is Lachlan Avil, and joining me today is Christian Montegan. Christian, we had a bit of an interesting week on the socials at Round Ball Australia. We were referring to Alex Paulson's transfer over to Auckland and referenced our nickname for the Kiwi Clash with a K. It's fair to say it didn't go down too well among some Kiwi supporters.
I hope our reputation didn't go down the toilet after that tweet, Lockie.
Can I just make it clear as well, when you say our choice of wording for the derby, it's actually yours, Lockie.
I have been pushing hard for it.
You have been.
I have been, but hello, Jacob Stevens, hello to you. I am willing to accept, though, that the fans, they should be making this decision, so I'm going to back away. We're putting the Kiwi Clash to bed, and then off the odd chance that the APL goes with that anyway, I'm going to laugh at everybody.
Yeah, that's fair enough.
All right, Poletti, hello to you as well, rounding out our team tonight.
Speaking of irrelevant, here's me.
Don't talk
What a way to start.
All right. Well, we're going to jump straight into it. The big story is that South Melbourne have revealed an open letter detailing their disappointment at the potential delay to a home and away national second tier. This letter, published through the Greek Herald on Thursday, talks about the proud history of South Melbourne Football Club, and I'm going to read a little bit from there. Quote, "Our journey has not been without its challenges. Our attempts to join the A-League have been met with disappointment on 3 occasions, despite our rich history and undeniable contribution to Australian football. These setbacks have not been due to a lack of capability or vision, but rather biases against our storied background and flawed expansion strategies that overlooked the essence of what makes a football club truly great." It continues, "We continue to advocate for the commencement of the national second tier in 2025, a platform where our historic club can once again showcase its prowess and contribute to the growth of Australian football. Our place is at the forefront, driving forward with the same passion and commitment that has defined us for almost 7 decades. South Melbourne FC, along with the other NST Foundation clubs, went through an extensive RFP and submission process, as well as providing a $500,000 bank guarantee based on the understanding and assurances that we would be establishing a standalone home and away second division. The national second tier in 2025 is our opportunity to finally unify the game and complete the football pyramid. It's time for the chairman and board of Football Australia to be pioneers and lead our great game." Christian, a lot of this process has happened behind closed doors. We haven't had a whole lot of access into what's going on. Now a little bit is starting to flow out, and it's clear that at least South Melbourne aren't too content with how the process is going.
How convenient that they've beaten the Wellington Phoenix, and now a few days later they've come out with this statement, because towards the end they said, they won that round of 32 clash. They belong in the first division. Obviously the second division has to come into play as well. That's how they'll formally be introduced. But I mean, a part of the quote that sort of struck me was this part where they said, quote, "These setbacks have not been due to a lack of capability or vision, but rather biases against our storied background and flawed expansion strategies." So they really need to be careful with their words, because when you start including cultural background as a reason for their exclusion thus far, then it really can get ugly, and it gives the fans this unwanted perception that it's them against Football Australia and the rest of the A-League. And I mean, the FA not wanting South Melbourne in the second division, if they didn't want them in there, then they wouldn't have been on the list in the first place. Simple as that. So, I've always believed that there's a bit more to it from a financial standpoint, in that the FA perhaps aren't as confident that clubs like South Melbourne and other NST clubs can survive financially in the long term. Even though that statement read out that they provide a $500,000 bank guarantee for their inclusion. So it has to be either that, or I don't see why this move has taken so long to eventuate. There could be a couple of things that have happened behind the scenes that obviously we're still yet to know. But the statement, it's come out of the blue, really. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, so you're right. That line of biases against our storied background is an interesting one. And look, I agree. They do have to be careful. I'm not going to tell them who's right or wrong. I don't feel anywhere near qualified to do so. But Jacob, what I can't get past is the fact that Football Australia have been one of the parties that have been pushing for this competition for so long. It's not like the effective way to keep teams like South Melbourne out of the spotlight would be to draw them all the way into confirming inaugural teams and then closing the door that far. We wouldn't have got anywhere close to where we are, for me, if that was their true intention.
Yeah, although on the other hand, we might be sort of entering this period where it's become sort of a sunk cost fallacy, right? Where they're like, we put all this effort in to get even these 8 teams, we've got to do something. And that's what the teams are unhappy with, is that it's not what they were promised at the start. But the FA are going, well, we've got to do something because you're going to be even more unhappy if we just have nothing going forwards. So there's sort of fighting that battle on two fronts there. And how can they put out a competition that teams will be happy with? Well, they can't really, not at this stage, because as they've detailed previously, and as we spoke about on the podcast, there are massive challenges, that they face in getting up this full home and away season, competition that was sort of the expectation coming into it. And so, it's sort of this case of FA, I don't think can really win in this situation, to be honest. And I don't think that this is a sentiment that would be held solely by South Melbourne. I think probably a few of the clubs that are the 8 inaugural ones with the NST are probably feeling very similar, in that it does feel like they're just sort of being let down again and again and again. And with South Melbourne, of course, we know that they've consistently pushed forward to try and break back into the professional football scene again, right after the and they went back to NPL. And, they've been constantly, they say, we've been, rejected from the A-League 3 times sort of thing. And the bit that I have is their whole holier than thou sort of approach to it. They're going on about how it's, that spot is rightfully theirs, and that they belong there. But then, 3 or 4 paragraphs later in this statement, they're going on and they're bashing the A-League, saying how it's all run and owned by franchises and it's all just protecting their own interests. And it's like, well, do you want to be a part of that, or do you not want to be a part of that? If you don't want to be a part of that, why do you care so much about it? It's hypocritical. It does sort of, it feels like they're taking the moral high ground, even though I think from some of the wording in here, they don't really have much of a leg to stand on. But that being said, you can understand their frustrations, because they have tried for a long time to get to a stage where they can become a fully professional football club again, and they just keep hitting these setbacks. And with the NST, it looked like it was finally going to get there, right? These clubs were finally going to get that chance to, again, play on the national stage. And now it's sort of hit another roadblock of, well, we don't know what, format the competition is going to take. There was a piece out from the Professional Footballers Association as well, saying that there are issues with the players, and that players haven't been consulted throughout this, both from the clubs and from Football Australia in terms of what it's going to look like moving forwards. So it just seems like there is a whole lot of mess. And so, yes, you can understand the frustration of the club. I think FA are in a tough position, but like Christian said, I think it's all about choosing your words wisely. And I think that they've come in pretty strong-handedly here, South Melbourne. And I wouldn't expect anything less, but it is definitely very interesting to see.
So on your point about, whether they would want to even be part of the A-League the way they're talking about, for me, my impression, learning about, the Victorian NPL clubs are a little bit over the last 12 months. Obviously, they have this history where they were part of the NSL, they had the national competition, they had something to aspire to, whereas now, even if it's, the A-League isn't the ideal format, which I think we all agree it's not the ideal format as it is currently, but it's being stuck in Victoria, not having a way to get out, not having something higher to grow to, Poletti, is this frustration that's built up over the past 20 years. And perhaps some of their specific arguments are a little bit off the mark, but as Jacob said, you can understand why that 2 decades of potentially resentment, but at least that feeling of wanting to be able to grow and strive for something builds up.
I mean, if you want to talk about resentment, I'm sure that there's a former NSL side way back in the 70s that would have a lot of resentment towards South Melbourne for playing politics and ensuring that they didn't get relegated despite finishing last, talking about protecting your own interests to follow up from Jacob's point. I mean, it's rank hypocrisy from South Melbourne. And look, I don't really have any sort of skin in this game, right? I know we like to, and we're certainly not the only podcast that does this, but, you know, we like to play up the NPL, New South Wales versus Victoria rivalry sometimes. But it's fun. It's banter, right? This is almost going beyond banter, you know? You want to talk about your rightful place in the A-League, but nothing in this country in terms of football is rightful for anyone. No one has a rightful place anywhere in football in this country, because we just know all of the challenges that impact the game here. And like there's a reason that the NSL failed and it was replaced by the A-League. Is the NSL was completely unsustainable, and had the NSL continued, it could have had a longer lasting disastrous impact on Australian football that not even the boom that the Matildas had would have been able to fix, because there might not have been a Matildas boom, because the game would have suffered wholeheartedly had the NSL not been replaced by the A-League. And look, you can talk about the merits about whether some of these NSL sides should have been in the A-League from the start. I'm not here to debate that, but to come in and cry, woe is me, but then also say, you know, we deserve this, we you know, and everything else that they said in this letter, it just really irks me the wrong way. And if I was on the side of South Melbourne supremacy before, this would, like let's say I was sitting on the fence, this would very much irk me the wrong way of being like, well, do we really want to see you succeed now? Because arrogance just doesn't play well with me.
I like the point Poletti brings up about the NSL as well, in that these clubs, and South Melbourne in particular, had their chance and blew it, basically, right? Because it became an unsustainable model. You know, it's like that's the other thing, is it's like, I know that history isn't a reliable indicator of future performance or whatever that industry super fun dad says, right? But, you know, if you've got a history of being a professional club and then not being able to continue to be a professional club because of continued issues with, you know, what's the phrase I continue to say on this podcast, is egos, and there's an ego problem in Australian football. It was the case back then, seems to still continue to be the case, right? Is that egos and politics and infighting and all this, and that's what ruined it back then. Should we believe, especially with a statement like this, that it would be any different now?
I'm going to try and play the other side of this because I feel like we're going quite hard. You made the point, Poletti, about the fact that no team is promised or deserves anything in Australian football, but surely you can understand the direct comparison between a club like South Melbourne that's been around for a while, has such a storied history, so much Australian football history, you know, people have come through that club. And you compare them to an A-League franchise that has been just created out of thin air for this competition. You can understand when you compare them side by side, if you think one, if you want to use the word deserves to be somewhere or another, well, the A-League clubs have only been around for 20 years, where a lot of these other clubs have had a lot longer history than that and have produced a lot of Australian footballing people.
No, I do understand that to a degree. I think one of the things that you need to look at is, yes, these clubs were created out of thin air, and I know we all love the McFranchise jokes and all of that, but at the same time, you go back to the formation of all of these sides. They were all plucked out of thin air from somewhere, right? But because they've got 60 years of history, we're supposed to because they've got 60 years of history, we're just supposed to revere them as this historic institution. I mean, not to divert away from Australian football so much here, but like if you look at the Premier League, teams like Manchester City, Manchester United, they more resemble franchises like American sports would than they do actual clubs right now, where I'm sure if their owners felt that they could make a quid by relocating the team from Manchester to Liverpool, they do so. Like, football is changing, and I'm not saying that anything is right or anything is wrong in this case in terms of where teams sit in history, where all these things deserve, but the A-League came about because of historic problems with Australian football, and I think should some of these sides have been in the A-League? Quite possibly. I'm not going to dispute that. Is it possible for them to be there now without promotion and relegation? No, it's not, because they mentioned Western United in this letter. Having a fourth team in Melbourne just doesn't work, and same with Sydney. Having a fourth team in Sydney now just wouldn't work. So you'd need to promotion and relegation that up through the pyramid. Just ensure that if you actually do get relegated, that you don't try to fight it and force someone else down.
Christian, let's bring it back to the NST a little bit. I'm interested as to what you think might be going on in the heads of the decision makers at Football Australia, because they've made it very clear that it's not their job to pay for the NST. So, Jacob talked about this sunk cost fallacy. Going forward, there's not a whole lot of risk specifically for them. A lot of the risk is coming from the clubs, and they've had these bank guarantees, the license fees, to ensure that they can, probably year one, year two, they're probably all very safe. But after that, maybe it's a little bit dicey. If the risk is on the clubs, and the clubs, if they come out like South Melbourne have, clearly want this home and away, then do Football Australia have a responsibility to say, no, actually, you're going to go broke in 3 years, we're going to stop you from doing this? Or should they just step back and say, okay, let's do it?
I think Football Australia definitely have a responsibility. And I think it's on them as well for how this has all played out over the past few years, where, South Melbourne, they talk about those 3 rejections. Like you said, Lockie, it's still on the clubs mostly, in terms of money-wise, but that just shows how passionate South Melbourne are, to be fair to them. They clearly want this. They want to be in this new competition. They'll do everything possible, everything in their power to ensure that they're included as a fully professional club. But at the same time, surely they need a helping hand from, whether it be the FA or the APL, whoever. They just need some help. And not just them, all the other clubs who are competing in the NST, or the supposed NST that's going to be planned ahead. I do feel sorry for them. I do see your point, Lockie, where you're trying to see the other side of it. You look at a club like Western United. I think if the FA and the APL had their time again, I don't think they would have probably gone ahead with the move. They would have went a different direction. But that's the same with everything. Like, to build the A-League from scratch, you obviously needed to pluck clubs from thin air, like Poletti was saying before. Obviously, some clubs have grown enormously, like Victory and Sydney FC, rightfully so, because of the population and their demographic. But South Melbourne, to be fair to them, they've still got that prestige, that history behind them. But at the same time, you can't just use that, I guess, as an excuse to say, okay, this is rightfully mine. Nothing's rightfully yours. And as Jacob also touched on earlier, it's their issues in the past that sort of diverted them away from, the NSL sort of collapsing with the other clubs. So they weren't in a sustainable position to be in a discussion for first tier football in the first place beforehand. So yeah, it's a really prickly situation. But obviously we all just hope that it gets resolved sooner rather than later.
Hey everyone, it's just Lockie cutting in solo for a little bit. I did just want to talk to you for a second directly. Obviously, you will have noticed over the past few months, we've started incorporating sponsored segments into our show. This is something that we're doing to hopefully make this podcast and everything we're doing with print and YouTube as well a little more financially sustainable. We love what we do. The money isn't why we do it, but the truth is, in order to do it long term, this is what we have to do. So thank you for putting up with us. We have a great sponsor in Deploy Football. You've heard the spiel before, but they do have really high quality stuff. Their footballs, you've heard us talk about it. The FIFA Quality Pro license, partnered with associations all over the country that do custom kits, high quality, quick turnaround, no lock-in contracts. So you've heard all that stuff before, but they really are great. They've supported us very nicely. and do know that by supporting them, you're supporting us in our coverage of Australian football. So thank you for your time. Let's get back to the episode.
On something Christian just said there about, the FA having a bit of a responsibility to the clubs to make sure that they don't sort of just implode and destroy themselves. I actually kind of disagree with that. I think if these clubs want to throw everything that they have at this one chance, there's this one more chance to become a fully professional club, and in the process of that, they, completely implode and self-destruct, I think that that's part of the risk that they've got to weigh up, right? I think if you risk the club completely just not existing anymore, right? Is that a risk you really want to take just for this one more shot at becoming a professional club? Is it worth throwing away all this history you're talking about, all these great names that have come through the club? I mean, someone like South Melbourne, who has a huge junior program as well, a decent supporter base. What, you're willing to throw all that away potentially if this fails? I don't think that that's the FA's responsibility. I think that's on the clubs themselves, because they're the ones that have to go, are we willing to do that? Are we willing to get rid of all of that? Is the benefit of this national second division, whatever it might be, whatever it might look like, is that worth the risk of us no longer existing? I don't think that. I think that the FA, all they can do is go, we've put in these stringent financial tests to try our best to incentivize you to look at this from a sustainability point. But if clubs are going to go all the way, balls to the wall and fully commit to it, and in the process they end up folding, I think that's on them. I don't think that the FA should feel guilty for it, and I don't think that they necessarily owe any responsibility to the clubs to protect them from themselves, because the clubs first and foremost have to have their own self-interest at hand, and if they don't have that, then I think they're just sort of proving some of the points that a lot of the doubters are having, that they don't actually know what's best.
And I'm just saying a helping hand though. I'm not saying fully help them out, because like I mentioned from the start, I think that's part of the reason, this financial issue that the FA can see, and they probably think to themselves, okay, they're in the long term, they're probably not financially stable enough in the next 3-4 years. They might collapse before then or even afterwards. So they're just looking at that from like a 10, 20 year sort of project, not this short term where, okay, we'll just chuck in the NST and see what happens. They want to make sure that this is absolutely right, 100% spot on from the get-go.
Yeah, and I think that's why the FA put in those financial restrictions. That's the point of having the massive $500,000 guarantees and whatever that the clubs have been complaining about, is to sort of, is that, I guess, helping hand from the FA to say, look, if you can't even front this up, then you're going to struggle. So that's I think they've done their jobs there, and if the clubs are going to take it further, then that's on them. But Poletti,
So I just want to say, if memory serves me correctly, I believe one of the clubs has set up, or at least undertook the process of setting up their NST side as a separate entity to the rest of the clubs. That way, if the NST side fails, the entire club doesn't go under. Because, as you said, that's a situation that a lot of these sides are looking at, is that if the NST club goes under, the whole club goes under. And then you want to talk about history. Well, these historic clubs are going to cease to exist or restart as a new entity again, and all that history becomes lost. So I think, as much as I think we all want to see the NST get off the ground, it just has to be very, very careful about it.
Yeah, and if I can bring it back to another open letter that we saw a few months ago now from Melbourne Knights, talking about why they didn't want to participate in the national second tier. It was about that risk, and they made the decision exactly what you said, Jacob, that it wasn't worth the risk to put their football club on the line for a competition that might not be financially sustainable. And to be honest, I think I'm in your camp, where FA have put the bar very high. If the teams are here, and as long as FA can mitigate their own risk, I'm not exactly sure what that might be, but if they can do that and the clubs still want to push, and all of the clubs, right, we're only hearing from one at the moment, there's 7 others that we need to talk to, but if they want to do it, I think that's on them, Christian.
No, I definitely see that point. And Jacob's argument, I definitely see that side of it. I'm just saying, you don't want to see in the A-League, for example, like clubs like Gold Coast and North Queensland Fury just going under when, I think there could have been more financial support available. Not that there was, but yeah, at the same time, the clubs, if the bar's set here, like you've said, and if it's not met, then of course, I agree that they shouldn't be in it, but there still has to be a bit of that balancing act at the same time where if we want this off the ground, then both parties just need to align and be on the same page. Otherwise, I just don't see it working.
Do you think there's a point of no return, Poletti? Because we talked plenty in this process about the fact that if this doesn't work, it sets the idea of a national second tier back so far. Are we almost like just so close where if we cancel now, it's going to screw it up anyway? So why not go for it?
I think there's a difference between delaying it and cancelling it entirely. And like, as I said, the joke has always been, the current year +2 is when we're getting the NST. Well, at this point, does it really matter if it's 2026 instead of 2025? Like, if it means that we're going to have a better competition, maybe another 12 months isn't the worst thing. Now, I think the problem that you might run into there is the way things are set up in the state federations. In terms of who goes up, who goes down, are the competition regulations already set for 2025 across the NPL competitions? Where do all these sides sit? Do they have a place in the NPL competitions in 2025? Because they've all been so steadfast in, no, the NST is coming in 2025, say goodbye to the state leagues, or the NPL competitions, I should say. And almost, if these sides are forced out by the state federations, do they almost have to do the NST by default to ensure that they play football in 2025 amongst themselves?
Yeah. So this is quickly turning into a crisis point for Football Australia because we are now, this very weekend, this episode is released on Friday, 2 nights, games will be played in the final round of NPL seasons across the country, where in Victoria and New South Wales, people don't know how many teams are getting relegated. People don't know how many teams are getting promoted from different leagues. In the last round of the season, teams don't know what they have to do to survive or go up. And there's also the issue of player registrations. They have to be done tremendously early in these state competitions. So for next season, registrations have to be done this calendar year. There's not a lot of time to work with. So this is a matter of weeks. A decision has to be made. It's quickly coming to that point.
I think you're almost looking at a matter of days, not weeks at this point.
Look, potentially, we know that James Johnson is back. There was reports saying that there'll be in-person talks after his return from Paris. So, look, it has to be happening incredibly quickly. That's what we've come down to now. But we're going to leave that there. I think we've covered that pretty comprehensively. We're going to go to some transfer news in the A-League, and the big one is that the previous Johnny Warren medalist, Josh Nisbet from the Central Coast Mariners, is set to move to Ross County in the Scottish Premiership. Now, this was originally a rumour. It's grown a little more legs, which tends to happen when the coach of the team that's securing the player comes out and starts talking about him. So County coach Don Cowie openly called the transfer a real coup to get him in. This is according to the Press and Journal UK. Christian, I think this is a bit of a weird comparison, but I think there's a real Ange Postecoglou kind of feeling about this move, which is weird because he's a manager, but bear with me. When he went to Celtic, obviously there's the Scotland League. That's one part, right? But as Australians, us four and fans of the Australian game, most of us kind of believe that Ange Postecoglou and Josh Nisbet, their level is higher than the Scottish Premiership, right? And they were probably looked down upon because of characteristics that they couldn't control, and simply because he was Australian, didn't have the access to coaching opportunities. Now, he's helped a lot of people, including Josh Nisbet, as an Australian because of how well he's done. But for Josh Nisbet, it's his height. And there's undoubtedly been a lot of clubs that have looked at him and said, he's a great footballer, but he's too small to make it at X level. And it's unfortunate, but he is now in Europe. He is in a league that is knocking on the door of the top 5 European leagues. He's in the shop window, which is the phrase that people often use it. It's probably not where he wanted to end up, the ideal situation. We know he wanted to play in potentially a bit more of a technical league as well, but it is a step up. It is an upgrade into Europe, and he's now in that shopping window.
I definitely agree with that comparison because you see both Postecoglou and Nisbet, they've both had to grind a bit, in their journey to get to where they are. Postecoglou coming through the ranks of the A-League, going off to Japan, then Scotland, then finally getting that move to Tottenham. He's had to do a bit of work to get there. And then you got Nisbet as well. Obviously came through the Mariners Youth Academy, had to wait a couple of seasons to get his real opportunity. And then the past couple of seasons, he's been nothing short of sensational, and he's rightly earned that move abroad. I do agree that I guess the move to Scotland is not ideal, considering the physicality aspect of it. That's going to be the real question. Can Nisbet handle that physicality of the Scottish League? Because he's held his own fairly well in the A-League. And, the couple of appearances he's had for the Socceroos when he's come on. But Scotland's a different beast, right? And I know people say, oh, yeah, it's a farmers league, this and that. And Jacob will probably, put crap on them as well, being an Englishman. But, at the same time, they've still got pedigree behind it. And I don't see it as a backwards move. I wouldn't agree with that entirely. He needs to start from somewhere, right? He's not going to go to a top club in Europe straight away. He's not going to, or he could have maybe gone to maybe a Celtic or a Rangers, but I don't think he would have seen much game time, if any. Probably would have got loaned out, something of that nature. So the fact that he's at Ross County, yes, the club finished second from bottom in the first phase last season in the Scottish Premier League, but like I said, he's just got to, just build himself up to become that player where, top clubs are looking at him in the future. If it's next season or the season after, just build that reputation, that experience behind him, because obviously he's got the talent. We've seen that. Johnny Warren medalist. He's been fantastic for the Mariners. And yeah, the move could work out. But again, it's that physicality side of it that I'm really intrigued to see how he handles it.
Jacob, he's talked openly about the fact that when he moved away from the Central Coast Mariners, he wanted to pick the right league that would be good for him. This probably isn't exactly what he had in mind, but Scottish football is probably stereotypically, and it's probably more built up in my head, known as a kind of a more physical footballing league. How do you think that will affect his development compared to, say, something like the Dutch league, where it's a lot more technical?
Yeah, well, I mean, you do get that sort of pit in your stomach seeing, Australian footballers heading over to the Scottish League, because, you think Garen Quoll had that awful loan spell. Daniel Arzani, obviously through no fault of his own with an injury, but it's still, you get that sort of feeling of impending doom almost, that this isn't going to pan out well. And especially when you're moving to a club that, let's be honest, not very good, right? Like they're firmly one of the worst teams in that league. And it seems like he had his mind set on not returning this season, no matter what, and he was going to take whatever he could get, where it almost seems like if he'd have just come back for a year, he'd have had better options come up, and especially if he could continue his form on. And that's where you do sort of think, was this the right move for him? And yes, okay, the jokes about him being short and things like that, but I mean, who else they joked about being short and being too small for football? Lionel Messi.
You didn't want to make an Aaron Kunda comparison last week, but you're doing Messi today.
No.
Messi today.
Jacob, what he needed to do, if Nisbet was so hard, head fast on going to a technical league, what he needed to do was sign with Adelaide United so he could get loaned to a Dutch club.
That's right. Yeah, we'll take him. Yeah, happily.
But he won't play a minute for you because he's going straight to the Netherlands on loan. Yeah. But I mean, it also just it'd be a lot different if he was going to a club like Hearts, right? Like a proper mid-table club. They've got a shot at silverware in the cup. Like Ross County, from my brief understanding of the Scottish League, they're probably going to be battling relegation again. Like, it's a great place where you can build yourself in terms of, you were crucial to your side staying up. Like, sides rate that sort of tenacity and that ability to, guide a side through a relegation battle. But it could also just end as very, very badly in that, you were a crucial part of their midfield. Oh, and, you got relegated. Whoops.
See, I really strongly disagree with Jacob on the idea of him potentially staying another year, because you've played in the A-League and you've broken out as this star player of the league. You've won the best and fairest for the league. You've won a treble. You've played some of the best football we've seen from a player in the league. I don't see how there's an upside where it can get better than that. Like, what would he have to do?
I'm not saying that, like, you know, I fully understand his perspective of wanting to move on to bigger and better things and a new challenge and stuff. I'm just saying, is it possible that a better opportunity would have come up in a year's time versus what he was able to get now, having to take this spot at Ross County?
Well, where would it come from, though?
I think Lockie's saying, he's arguing that what more could he have done? Because obviously he's won the treble. He's done so much already. What more can he show to prove that he belongs in a better club?
Yeah, I guess. Maybe it's then just destined for it to never happen. He's, you know, maybe it's a case of this prejudice against him for being small. That's not something he'll be able to shake off, you know, for the rest of his career. Then maybe, you know, if this is as good as he can get here and the best move he can possibly manage is to Ross County, you know, it's like I said, I fully understand his perspective of wanting to move on, wanting a new challenge, wanting potentially to break into Europe and a top 5 league there. But if this prejudice is so strong against you and you just can't shake it off no matter what, like, you know, maybe
but it's
maybe
not
there
no
is
matter
no
what, because let me bring back the Ange comparison. When you're not totally blocked out, saying the goal is, you know, managing a top team in the top 5 leagues, that goal is not completely blocked out. But what Ange had to do more than most is grow incrementally, bit by bit. He was successful at South Melbourne. That name comes up again. He was successful with the Brisbane Roar, and then he was successful at Yokohama, and he was successful at Celtic, and now he's landed himself at Tottenham. So I think Nisbet was well aware that the season he's just had was the best possible time to go, and he just had to get the best move possible. Unfortunately, it seems like that's to the bottom of the Scottish Premiership. But he's got to take that approach from Ange and do well at that location. Then it becomes the next step and the next step.
Yeah, and I get, like, building incrementally, but are you trying to make the argument there that stepping from the A-League to the J-League with Yokohama is the same as jumping from the A-League to the bottom of the Scottish Premiership?
No, I'm not saying that the steps are equal. That's an even more incremental step. But it's the Scottish League, probably in some areas, is much more respected than the Australian League. And if you can it's easy to send scouts. People get to see him firsthand. If you make what is perceived as a step up and then you do well, you're going to get the next step up somewhere.
Yeah. But I just think that, can he do well in a team that's not going to compete, you know?
Also,
like, I guess in some ways it does make it easier for him to stand out, right? Because if he does have a good game, it's likely that the rest of the players around him probably aren't going to, given their form. So it does make him stand out a little bit more. But, you know, does it also take away, because we know how well he works in those midfield units where he can, you know, work with other players and things like that. And that's where he really thrives. So, you know, could that be detrimental because he's coming into a squad that, you know, potentially don't have the quality that he needs to thrive?
I know.
I don't know. I'm just skeptical. It's just
going to play like this. Ange Postecoglou is going to sign Josh Nisbet after next season, the year after, to Tottenham Hotspur.
January transfer window, mate. They're going to be battling for top 4. You need someone in the midfield.
Yeah, January. I wouldn't complain with that. Would love to see that.
Well, Tottenham have just lost a player that they brought up in their academy to Australia. So maybe it's time we give someone brought up in Australia back to Tottenham. I'm referring to Wellington's new goalkeeper, Josh Nisbet, 23 years old, as I said, out of the Tottenham academy a few years ago. Played his football most recently in Finland. Chiefy said in the past, Poletti, that if they weren't able to find the profile of a goalkeeper that they were looking for in Australia, they were going to go overseas. This is what they've done. They've gone for, again, I want to say it, the Central Coast Mariners playbook of finding someone from a top European academy who's perhaps dropped out a little bit, still young, got him over with potentially something to prove, and Wellington have their keeper.
Yeah, I mean, if there's one thing we saw from Giancarlo Italiano last year is that he knows how to get the best out of his players. So even if this is very much a left field signing that I don't think anyone was sort of expecting, all hail the Chief and back him in.
All hail the Chief. What was the sign that they had up at the final where one of the words fell off?
No, it didn't fell off. They forgot to put it on.
They just forgot to put it on, did they?
Yeah.
Made it work.
No, it was hailed. It was hailed to the Chief, but they forgot to put the 2 on, so it read "Hail the Chief."
Hale and Chief.
That's
Nice.
not that
Still
bad.
works.
No, it's
Still
not. It
works.
still makes sense.
I remember it worse than that.
It's not like they left off Chief.
Hail to that. All right. Well, they have picked up someone else as well, Jacob. They've signed 16-year-old Luke Brooks-Smith on a 3-year deal, 2 of those years on scholarship terms. The interesting part about this is that he's come from outside of their academy, which to get a pro deal for someone so young that hasn't come up through their own ranks is quite rare. What else is rare is that a professional footballer is an 8-time national age group BMX champion. How about that?
Well, there we go. If his career in football doesn't pan out, we know where else he can go. But no, I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because we don't even see Australian clubs doing this too often in terms of getting players outside of their own streams. Adelaide United do it occasionally with players from MPLSA, but it's typically older players. So like Austin Ayubi was last season, not a 16-year-old that, normally you're going to bring them in and bed them into your academy. This is, straight up, they're putting faith in him to be able to perform. And look, we keep talking about how clubs are going to have to invest in youth. And if the Phoenix sort of recognize that perhaps their academy isn't up to standard and where it needs to be, then they do need to look elsewhere to be able to bring these youngsters in. And, the fact that they're proactively going out and doing it, I think is a better sign than sitting back, resting on their laurels and perhaps not having those academy graduates coming through that they need to bolster their squad this season, the next season and into the future. So, no, I think it's a smart move. Obviously, I don't know too much about him, never seen him play, never even heard of him before this, right? And I don't think any of us have. I will pay any of you $5 if you've heard of him before. But
I've heard of him.
$5. But that's more unlikely than you getting a prediction right, by the way.
Hey!
Did you have to go there? Come on.
Well played. Series is back, by the way. Check it out on YouTube.
Yeah, that's right. But no, I mean, it's good signs that they're at least being proactive in identifying potentially weak spots in their system and their structures. And I mean, hopefully it pans out for him. But, Wellington, they're not, investing a huge amount in him. He's only 16 years old, a 3-year deal. He'll be 19. So even if he, it's not like you've still got a chance to develop him after that, even if it doesn't pan out by then, right? It's also, he's not going to be on the same amount of money as somebody like a Costa Barbarouses is, right? So, the level of investment from Wellington is a lot lower. It's a good chance for this youngster to come in. So, yeah, I think it's a clever move.
I've only got 2 quick things I just want to say about this. I think, hear me out, 2028 Olympics, right? He'll be more than eligible for the New Zealand under-23 national squad. Dual Olympian. He plays for the under-23s and he also qualifies for the BMX racing or the BMX freestyle. And if that doesn't work out, he can get on his bike and go find another job.
That would be a hell of a feat for sure. A couple of other little rumours just to make you aware of. 10 News is reporting that several overseas teams are trying to lure away Nicholas Milanovic from the Western Sydney Wanderers. Now, he had a deal to Dinamo Zagreb that was believed to be all done, but that fell through. He's a remarkable player. I'm sure there'll be more interest. We'll have to wait. There's still at least a month, I think, or it might be a month and a day, actually, until the closure of the transfer window. So plenty of more time to play out with him. Brazilian journalist Vene Casagrande is reporting that Sydney FC have signed Brazilian central midfielder Leo Senna. It's apparently a 2-year deal. He spent most of his career in Brazil with a brief stint at Spezia in Serie A, played 16 games for them. That one's also very fresh, not a whole lot of information on that. But one that we do have, Christian, is that Claire Hunt is moving from PSG to Tottenham, a big European move for her.
Yeah, definitely. And she obviously suffered that injury towards the back end of last season where perhaps there was the possibility that might derail her Olympic campaign. Fortunately, that wasn't the case. Had a good season for her standards, but I think this move might be better for her in terms of the environment. I think a better culture. Obviously, she'll be playing with Charlie Grant, fellow Australian as well, in the squad. So, yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how she, I guess, fits in. Will she start from the get-go? Will she need a few games to, I guess, not test herself, but prove herself to see, if she's capable of, being in the starting 11. That's just all the stuff that just has to play out and see where it goes from there. But no, in terms of Claire Hunt moving to the Women's Super League, I think it's a great move for her. her capabilities are definitely, her strengths are definitely align with that league, the physicality. She reads the game extremely well. I think she can be a good fit. It's just whether she can get that consistent minutes of football under her belt.
Yeah, been consistently one of the Matildas' best players over the last couple of years. So good luck to her now in the WSL. Poletti, I hope you've been warming up because you have a long list of dub transfers to catch us up on this week.
65 billion.
That was what Poletti quoted in the group chat earlier.
No, I did. If you thought that I had a lot last week when I brought this up, I've certainly got a lot more now. And Jacob will be familiar with this because this is going to very much resemble Booger's 3 minutes with how much I've got to try and get through and do it quickly. So we're gonna, I'll explain when we get off here, Lockie.
That's a great reference.
So we're going to go to the under-20s Women's World Cup. Football Australia announced this morning that Amelia Murray has suffered an injury and will be replaced in the young Matilda squad by Avani Prakash for the upcoming tournament. If you're not familiar with Avani Prakash, check out her time at Western United last season or her time at Bulls FC Academy this season. She's been on the radar of a lot of clubs since she was 10 years old in in the SAP program in New South Wales, and it takes a lot to build up a reputation like that early. One to watch for sure. Speaking of Matildas, we're going to go to Adelaide United next. Matilda McNamara has signed a 1-year deal with the Reds. It's the first signing.
Well, is it a 1-year deal?
No, it is a 1-year deal. Every article now says it's a 1-year deal. There was that 1 year or 2 year deal confusion. But no, it is a 1-year deal. It's the first signing that Adelaide have announced, I believe, for their dub program this season. So very excited to see who follows. We're going to go to Western United next, who have rounded out a number of signings this year, or this week, I should say. The Taranto twins have re-signed, as have Julia Sardo, Alyssa Doloste, and Natalie Prakak, as well as Amy Medwin. We're going to make like the village people now and go west as T-Jen McKenna, Isha Brooking, Georgia Cassidy, Izzy Dalton.
This is turning into a comedy segment.
What is going on?
Anya Niechi Zog, who's a Nigerian international, Tanika Lala, Kelly Brown, who's currently playing under MacArthur Rams head coach Stephen Peters, who's also announced as Perth Glory coach a couple of weeks ago. 34 goals and across the last 2 NPL women's seasons for her. Kelly Brown, still 2 games to go in the current league season, so she could add to that total. And Perth also announcing today at the time of recording that Welsh international Megan Wynn is signing for the club as well. So I expect Stephen Peters plans to do a lot of winning. We'll go to City now. They've signed American attacker Carriel Ellis on a 1-year deal. Now we'll make our way up to Gosford as Taylor Ray was announced today as having signed a 1-year deal with the Mariners, while earlier this week Kaya Simon, Faye Bryson, Casey DeMont and Paige Hayward have all departed the club following the conclusion of their contracts. We'll go to Brisbane. Zara Kruger has signed with the club after last season at Sydney FC, and Keely Richards has re-signed for 1 more year. And we're going to go all the way east this time. Sydney Uni's Director of Football, Amy Shepherd, will be joining Wellington as assistant coach in the A-League women's program. And English forward Olivia Ferguson will also join the club, having last played at Wolverhampton Wanderers in England. So that's a lot to get through, but we did it with a little bit of laughter along the way.
Can I just say that segment needs to be called Rapid Fire Poletti? How you've gotten through 65 billion transfers in 60 seconds, 2 minutes. That is insane.
I do want to say the Megan Wynn joke that you made, Perth are going to do a lot of winning. You trialled that in the group chat earlier, and I definitely thought that you pronounced her surname Wine and thought the joke was that they're going to do a lot of whining this year. I'm glad I was wrong because that's a much politer version of it.
No, Jacob got it because he immediately reacted with the facepalm emoji, so he knew what I was doing.
All right. Well, that was eerily similar of one of your older segments, Poletti, and I'm going to bring one of those back with a little bit of a twist because I'm going to have a little rant about the Asian Champions League Elite draw that is going to take place this afternoon as you're listening to it on Friday. That and the ACL2 will both be drawn. I did a little bit of digging into the process of how this draw works, and I'm a little bit dumbfounded, to be honest. It seems completely pointless to me. I don't know why people are showing up. So we know, I've talked about this plenty, that the new Asian Champions League elite format, instead of the regular groups of 4, we have the league phase. So let's talk about the East specifically. We have 12 teams and you play 8 games. So the 11 possible opponents, you play 8 of them, 4 home, 4 away, and then we go into the knockouts and do all that fancy stuff. So the draw on Friday will be determine who plays who in that league phase. Now, the process of the draw goes like this. It kind of happens in a similar way to a regular draw, where instead of drawing them into groups of 4, I'm going to call them sections of 4. So the idea is you have 12 teams, 3 sections of 4, and then whatever section you're drawn in, you don't play those teams and you play all of the other 8, if that makes sense. So you're essentially drawing teams that you don't play. However, the massive, massive asterisk on this is that nationality security is there. So Japanese teams can't play against Japanese teams in the league phase. South Korean teams can't play against South Korean teams in the league phase. The problem here is that they're in a league phase of 12 teams, there are 3 Japanese teams, 3 South Korean teams, and 3 Chinese teams that all get drawn in the same section. So essentially, for the 3 remaining teams, Buriram from Thailand, Central Coast from Australia, and Johor Darul from Malaysia, it is simply a game of which country do I get to skip entirely. Is it Japan, is it South Korea, or is it China? That's the only thing that is being decided on Friday. Maybe some home and away fixtures get flipped around a little bit, but that's pretty much it. And so we can even go into the draw knowing that the Central Coast will absolutely play Buriram and Johor, which is silly. And it gets even worse because we look over to the west side. Not only do they have 3 Saudi Arabian teams and 3 Qatari teams, but they also have 2 teams from Iran and 2 teams for the UAE. Remember, if you're keeping nations in place and they all have to be drawn in the same section, the 2 UAE teams and the 2 Irani teams have to be drawn in their own section. That section is already decided. Then you got 3 Saudi Arabian teams together and 3 Qatari teams together. All it is a coin toss between the Egyptian team and the Uzbekistani team to see if they get to skip Qatar or Saudi Arabia. It is completely pointless, Jacob. They literally should flip a coin and get it over with. It's clear that they're just copying the UEFA format, whereas they have a lot more teams. Asia has a lot less. It's not adapted to the reality of Asian football, apart from the fact that it just has less teams. It's really annoyed me, to say the least.
Well, and they just do a coin toss, and I mean, what's to say that's not how they're going to decide it anyway? Just go, let's just do it. It's very, very silly, like you said. And honestly, I think the Mariners should look at whichever country they're going to spend the most time in, just like buy a house there or something and just keep a few people there for the season, because it's an absolutely ridiculous thing where, could you imagine in the Champions League where an English side you're going to avoid for instance all of the German teams or all of the it's just it's so silly. It is such a silly concept. I might be mistaken,
but I think that UEFA Champions League in Europe has changed that rule a bit for this one, where I think you're allowed to play clubs from the same nationality. I might be mistaken, but I think they've changed that. So the fact that Asia brought this in now and you can't face the same nation is pretty ridiculous.
So it just contradicts itself entirely, because the point of the rule is to say, let's take Japan, for example. They have 3 teams qualified. You're in when we had the traditional group phase, I think that makes a lot of sense. You only have 3 opponents. You have plenty of others that we can choose from. Let's make sure you're not playing someone from your home country. But when you're picking this league phase and you're playing so many teams, remember there's 8 games in this league phase. I don't think it's a big deal if you have one of them in your own country, especially when it means that the Central Coast Mariners are skipping a country entirely. Surely that's reducing the mix of these teams, Poletti. It's actually reducing it.
It is. I mean, I can see the logic just simply from, I hate to use the term competition integrity, but like, maybe not competition integrity, fixture overload. We've gone on ad nauseum here about how playing some teams 3 times is too many in the A-League. You know, these sides already play each other once at home, once away. Do we really need to throw in a third fixture in the league stage between, you know, 2 of these Japanese sides or 2 of these South Korean sides, and then still potentially have them get matched up in the knockout stages again anyway? Like, this way you're at least ensuring that they can only play each other a maximum of, well, if you include, you know, local cup fixturing, a maximum of 4 times as opposed to 5 times, or, you know, potentially 6 times for the leagues that do have some sort of final series. Like, I understand the logic behind it. I do agree a little bit that it's not the smartest idea, but like, I can see the logic and logic.
Does it make a difference though? 4 or 5 times.
Well, I was about to say, from the club's perspective, surely they'd prefer not having to make a trip midweek to another country. Surely they would prefer to just stay where they are and just play a local team.
And the fact that it is a Champions League fixture elevates in itself. It's not just like another league fixture.
Yeah, this is true.
They're 2 completely different competitions.
I don't know. I can see both sides of the equation.
All right, well, that's my Lockie's Rant segment done. The draw's happening on Friday.
I'll expect my royalty check in the mail.
Yeah, the copyright has been infringed. Finally, for today's podcast, we're going to cross codes just a little bit, because with the Western Bears set to enter the NRL in 2027, Oliver Peterson of 6PR Perth is reporting that HBF Park is set for quite a significant upgrade. The state government reportedly could be looking to spend up to $300 million on an upgrade. Now, Jacob, it's probably not exactly what football needs or wants when we talk about boutique stadiums, but beggars can't be choosers. It's a lot of money inserted potentially to a stadium that football does use. I think we can be pretty happy with that.
And off the back of, I believe they had a bit of investment as well for the Women's World Cup, no? Yep. So just, you know, continuation of that is always nice. And $300 million is a hell of a lot of money. I mean, there are countries around the world where you could build a whole stadium for that. So, you know, definitely expecting some pretty significant improvements. But of course, then the big downside rather is that you're going to be sharing it with a league team. And we all know that pitch condition is always a big factor, especially when you look at, you know, Suncorp was the huge discussion there for a lot of the season was the quality of the pitch, you know, is having another team playing there, and especially, you know, a rugby team where they do churn the turf up a lot. Is that going to become an issue for Perth? And I think it leaves, just Hindmarsh now is the only, and Western United as well have their own ground now that isn't code shared. But yeah, only 2 stadiums now in the whole league that are solely for football use, which unless am I wrong with that?
Yeah, you were forgetting about the Western Force.
Yeah. Okay, so it leaves 1 then. Like, you know, that's even worse.
No, hold on.
No, because you've still got Hindmarsh, and then you've got the Western United's new stadium, Ironbark Fields, or whatever they're calling it.
The Western Force are the WA team that already played at HBF.
Oh, right.
In Super Rugby.
Yeah. It shows how much I know about that sport. Well, it doesn't help that you've got 2 teams in other sports in Melbourne with Western in their name. So, you know, you can kind of understand the confusion.
I'm looking forward to the distance derby between the New Zealand Warriors and the Western Bears. That would be a classic, wouldn't it?
All right. That seems like a perfect place to end it. That'll do for this episode of the Round Ball Australia podcast. Thank you again to Deploy Football for supporting our show. And Poletti, thank you for joining me tonight.
It's a good thing you stopped me before I brought back Poletti's rants to talk about the North Sydney Bears.
We are a football podcast. Round Ball is quite literally on the label. Christian Montegan, thank you.
Thanks, Lockie.
And Jacob Stevens, 50 episodes. Congratulations.
Raise
You
the
got
bat.
the cricket bat. Great reveal. Well played.
So yeah, that's been in my lap the whole recording. Just been waiting for the mention of it. But no, it's great. And here's to 50 more.
Great knock. Well, if no one's checked out the video pod yet, I think this is a great opportunity to do it. That's incredible. Well played. Thank you to everyone at home for listening again to us rant about the comings and goings of Australian football. We will be back on Tuesday. We'll see you there. Goodbye.